finance webinar we had with the development banks last week. We will have a briefing on it. Then Russell Galt will be introducing to us the policy technical guide that he's been developing on how to be integrating urban forests into national plans and policies. And then we will have a discussion. Last Thursday, as I was saying, we have been involving development banks like EIB, the Islamic Development Bank, the European Investment Bank, the World Bank, discussing how we can develop specific funding pipelines for urban forestry. And here is a few key takeaways from the finance webinar. We made the case for investment in urban forests. It was highlighting the importance of public and private funding mechanism for urban forestry and how we can be developing a bankable project pipeline, a compendium of funding concepts to develop projects proposals. And for the details, I pass the floor to my colleague Daniel Griswold, who will tell us more. Daniel?
Thanks very much, Stefania. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'll be very brief here because this was also a recorded webinar, so you're welcome to watch the recording. We'll be sending that out shortly. But basically, the webinar focused on the fact that there's different types of funding. There's basically public budgets at the city, at the municipal level, at the national level, where you can, through public action, through expenditure, also through regulation, you can unlock public or private finance. Of course, there's many other ways that people are looking to mobilize finance because we know that public budgets are stretched. So we heard from 4 development banks who are highlighting how they finance urban forests or are trying to finance urban forests in their pipelines. One of the big things to highlight here, I think, is that in all cases, what really is underpinning these investments is trying to have good data and information on what the benefits will be. So they have different ways to do this. What they do not have is dedicated investments in urban forests in most cases. They oftentimes include urban forests as a component within bigger projects. And this is actually why we are planning on developing funding concepts going forward, working with cities, national governments, and other stakeholders. The idea being that these sort of concepts can be integrated either into a city budget, a national budget. It can be integrated into an agreement with the development bank at the national level, a proposal to international financing like the Green Climate Fund, and many, many other sources. So going forward, we are going to be having a policy brief coming out in a couple of months, and we'll be inviting coalition members to participate in developing a funding compendium that we would share with the development banks and other funders. Thank you, Stefania.
Thank you, Daniel. So it's quite clear that financing urban forest requires multi-level, multi-sectoral approach. And so as much as there is clear financial constraints, there is also clear institutional barriers. And that's where national policies can come in and support urban forestry at local level with financial incentives, with regulatory frameworks, with integrated urban forestry into the climate global plans, encouraging intermunicipal collaboration, and that's why the idea of the technical guide came up. And that's where Russell Galt, and as I think it's as I was introducing him before, we have been happily collaborating in the past with various capacities from both sides, like ICLEI, IUCN, the Earthwatch Institute, and Russell came in order to be supporting us developing this very technical guide. We have had a number of interviews, very interesting. I have to say, we've been learning a wealth of information by and from national governments and local governments. And Russell, I give the floor to you to tell us where you are with the guidance, what it is about, all the challenges that you have been facing, but also the opportunities for the future.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Stefania, for that very kind introduction. Yeah, so I'm Russell. I'm a consultant. I work mainly with AIPH, which is the International Association of Horticultural Producers. I've also supported IUCN previously, and now I'm delighted to help Stefania and Daniel in developing these guidelines. So basically, I have been tasked with researching various different policy documents, NDSAPs, National Adaptation Plans, NDCs, to distill the various ways in which national governments are and can integrate urban forestry into their national plans. So I'm going to present today just a very broad overview of where we are currently. So the aim of these guidelines is essentially to assist national governments in integrating not just urban forestry, but sustainable urban and peri-urban forestry into their national policies. And we also want to define policy. I think that's very important as a course or principle of action adopted or proposed by an organization or individual. To undertake this research, I conducted 10 interviews, and those interviews have been with South Africa, Brazil, Somalia, Jordan, Ecuador, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Mozambique, and most recently, ICLE. I've also reviewed 737 policy documents. Now, just to be clear, I've not read all of those documents. Nowadays, we have the wonders of AI, so I've leaned heavily on a wonderful platform I can highly recommend called Google Notebook, where you can upload documents and you can use search queries to identify and extract excerpts of relevant text. So I used about 5 or 6 different keywords to compile a long list of evidence of how governments in practice are treating and integrating urban forestry across a range of policy documents. I mentioned a few earlier. So basically all the main plans and reports that are prepared via the Rio Conventions, but also national urban policies. UN Habitat supports many governments across the world in developing such dedicated national urban policies. Okay. So from this research, I distilled 8 what I would call catalysts for scaling sustainable urban forestry via national policy. I'm going to run through each of these in turn, but essentially it's to develop a dedicated national urban forestry policy. Many countries are doing that, to strengthen existing legal frameworks, find new and innovative financing mechanisms, strengthen capacity, empower communities, nurture collaboration and partnerships, foster sustainable practices, and embrace digital transformation. I'll address each in turn. So firstly, to develop a dedicated national urban forestry, we can look to the likes of Brazil and South Africa. Both of these countries are in the midst of developing their dedicated national urban afforestation plans and strategies. And to do so, they are consulting many, many different stakeholders. In the case of Brazil, I believe ICLE has been hired to consult as many as 500 stakeholders across the 5 different regions of Brazil. They're also conducting baseline assessments, and they're setting clear, measurable goals and targets with timelines, and strengthening enforcement mechanisms. Now, very interestingly, I found both countries are making a concerted effort to ensure integration across a range of other policies, non-environmental policies, so public health, transport, also, climate adaptation, and infrastructure development. And of course, they're seeking to align these with broader international commitments like the SDGs, the Rio Conventions, and the Sendai framework. Okay, another very obvious way you can scale urban forestry via national policy is to strengthen what you've already got. And here it's really important to look at policy coherence. So ensuring that the local, subnational, national, and even international policy objectives are all seamlessly aligned to realize synergies, avoid conflicts, and maximize impact. And we found evidence of this in the EU, where the biodiversity strategy for 2030 encourages cities with populations over 20,000 people, I believe, to all develop their dedicated urban nature action plans, importantly, in alignment and fully integrated with other sectoral policies, biodiversity conservation, adaptation, and social inclusion. I won't run through each of these, but just to give you another example of good practice, it's also important to set very clear targets, as I mentioned earlier. And now often policies exist, but they just don't have the clear time-bound targets. Now this can easily be remedied. So in the case of Liberia, they've set a target to achieve 50% canopy cover across their 5 largest cities by 2030. And of course, protections can be strengthened and even extended. So in Israel, the forestry ordinance extends protection to 68 tree species beyond urban forests. The third catalyst is to expand sustainable financing mechanisms. Of course, governments should adequately resource their urban forestry policies so they can set aside budgetary allocations. Additionally, they can look towards international development funds. So the GEF is running this Sustainable Cities program for many cycles now and has already released and dispersed several $100 million worth of grants and generated or leveraged over 4 billion in co-financing. So that's just one example of many other international funds that are available, particularly to cities and nations of the global south. There are also innovative financing mechanisms. I believe there is another policy brief which is being developed, and indeed there was a presentation just last week on this. I believe a professor from the School of Economics at Utrecht is leading that. But just to run through a few examples, carbon credits are really taking off, and there's increasing potential, I believe, for carbon credits to find traction in urban and peri-urban forests. Indeed, there are some organizations, some startups that are already trading carbon credits in urban markets. Also, land value capture, business improvement districts. There are many other innovative financing models that can be embraced. Public-private partnerships are another. India has actually identified public-private partnerships as a means to meeting its rather ambitious goals. I'll come to India later, but it's got big goals to increase the number of urban parks nationwide and increase urban forest cover. And then also quantifying the costs and benefits. So clearly, if you put nature on the balance sheet, if you have economically quantifiable arguments to make, quantified numbers that you can present to decision makers, you'll find much more traction. And there are many new ways that you can evaluate and valorize these ecosystem services to do so. And then finally, incentives and regulations. So I found this very interesting new law in Brazil. Apparently, it's actually been available since 2018, but it just hasn't really been utilized. But all environmental fines must dedicate 10% of revenue. So that's the revenue from these environmental penalties towards urban forestry. So that could unlock considerable capital for financing sustainable urban forestry. Fourthly, to build capacity and exchange knowledge. This is pretty obvious, it's not rocket science, but if you build capacity through training and guidance, as they are doing in Brazil through the Green and Resilient Cities program, organizing workshops, but also providing distance learning opportunities to maximize reach and impact. Centers of excellence can also help to broker knowledge and best practices. So in Saudi Arabia, just recently, they've launched this new center of excellence of urban trees. So that's something which could be an interesting example for others to emulate. And then, of course, peer learning. This is a peer learning network. There are many others through which national governments can connect and share experiences. And of course, citizen science is really important to empower and engage communities. They are the first custodians of nature, in a sense. And actually, if you can involve them as not just citizen scientists capturing data, but also as custodians of the trees, all the better. One such example is Observatory in the UK, where citizens can monitor tree health and report accordingly. Fifthly, we must foster community engagement and awareness. There are many wonderful examples I came across. These are just a few in Bahrain, where Bathur of Bahrain, which is a campaign, it's a digital platform encouraging or fostering awareness of the ecological benefits of forests. But also they have a mobile seed truck that travels around Manama and disperses seeds to citizens to encourage them to actually plant native tree species. In Brazil, they are harnessing traditional knowledge. I learned something new when I interviewed the government of Brazil twice, that apparently many indigenous people, if not most indigenous people in Brazil, actually now reside in cities such as Manaus and Sao Paulo, and they have incredible indigenous wisdom and traditional knowledge which could be applied to advance sustainable urban forestry, and the government is very much harnessing that. Art is an interesting vehicle through which to engage and empower communities. Zurich organized this Trees in Cities exposition, which was fabulously successful and helped to educate citizens on the importance of urban trees. Equity and inclusion, education, these are all other important measures that can be taken. In Eritrea, there are over 500 green clubs at schools across the country, not just educating kids and students on ecological subjects, but also empowering them with skills that they need to transition to a green economy. Sixthly, we should nurture collaboration and partnerships. Again, it's not rocket science. This is really obvious stuff. But the wonderful thing is it's actually happening. There are many, many examples I came across in my research. So collaboration and partnerships can extend in many different directions. They can be interdepartmental. A great example is, again, the Brazil Green and Resilient Cities program, which is a joint initiative of 3 ministries and really forces them to cooperate. There's also a rotating presidency or chairmanship of the committee that manages that program. Multi-level governance. I spoke about coherence of policies earlier. Multi-level governance is really important. And indeed, Colombia has been leading the way in its NBSAP. It actually stipulates that this is the co-responsibility of all spheres of government. Partnerships, I've mentioned public-private partnerships and the case of India, community involvement, NGO partnerships. There are many different types of partnerships that can bring value to urban forestry. Seventhly, national governments are recommended to prioritize sustainable practices and monitoring. Now, this is very broad, but by promoting sustainable practices, they can better ensure the survival of the forests and ultimately reduce management costs and maximize the benefits. So species selection is really important. It's so important to select the right tree and plant it in the right place for the right reasons. Of course, non-native trees are being used in cities across the world, and they will, in all likely, continue to be used, particularly in view of a very rapidly changing climate. But it's important that those non-natives are also assessed for their risks in terms of invasiveness, so that those risks can be minimized. And also they should be future-proof to ensure that they will survive not just now, but well into the future, because they should be around in 20, 30, even 100 years from now, some of them. There were some interesting initiatives I came across where countries are actually legally protecting and championing mature trees. Mature trees contribute disproportionately to the ecosystem services that citizens enjoy. And for that reason alone, they merit special recognition and protection. South Africa has a long-standing Champion Trees initiative, which is enshrined within the National Forestry Act of 1998. And this affords very, very strict protection to any trees that are deemed to be of exceptional national importance. There are also important considerations around water management. This is, of course, the Trees in Dry Cities Coalition. And so I paid special attention to irrigation, water recycling, and to my surprise, actually, there's a lot of innovation in this space. In places like Saudi Arabia, where the Green Riyadh project is creating the world's largest treated irrigation system to help irrigate the green infrastructure that is blossoming across Riyadh, and also to reduce reliance on potable water. And then it's important as well to establish robust monitoring frameworks. The best example I could find was the Urban Forest Inventory and Analysis Program, which is a US program. I hope it still exists, but it tracks the state and condition of urban forests across the country. And you will have come across, I'm sure, the 330-300 rule. This is a rule of thumb, a heuristic, a very simple heuristic that is actually incredibly popular. I found it in many different NBSAPs, in calls for expressions of interest and grants and tenders. It's really found its way into many different parts of the world's national policy. And one example is South Korea, the country's 5th National Biodiversity Strategy, its NBSAP, actually includes a provision to apply that rule and ensure that all South Korean cities meet it. Finally, data, technology, and digital transformation. This is incredibly important nowadays, where if it's not digitized, it's not relevant, it's not known. Everything we do just about is now via computers. And it's really important to take advantage of the many different technologies at our disposal. National governments can build thriving ecosystems of data, and they can also leverage digital technology to advance and improve management practices, and they can promote open data and collaborative innovation. So a few examples. One is Israel's urban forestry and shading strategy, which actually, if you read it, has a lot about data management, data security, citizen science. So there's a very strong focus there on data ecosystems and infrastructure. Also, I've mentioned the US a few times, but the Forest Service has developed this fantastic tool, iTree, which I'm sure you've come across. I believe it's being used globally. But that's one example of a sort of open source tool that a government has developed to advance urban forestry. And then in Sweden, the country's National Forest Inventory monitors urban forests across the country and makes that data freely available to researchers and others. So these are some examples of how national governments can really embrace digital transformation. And I haven't even mentioned LiDAR, drones, remote sensing. There's so many other technologies, eDNA, that can be used nowadays to lower the costs, increase the granularity and frequency of data collection. So here again are the 8 catalysts for scaling sustainable urban and peri-urban forestry. I hope this was useful. These guidelines will be finished shortly. I'm hoping to wrap them up in the next month, well, certainly the next couple of weeks. And then I would welcome any comments and feedback, and we'll work closely with Stefania and Daniel to refine and complete them. I should also add there's another set of guidelines which is focused on the Rio Convention specifically and builds on these guidelines. And they are also very much in the pipeline. Thank you.
I had the feeling of taking an airplane, catching a flight, and going from country to country, from city to city. It's quite fascinating, I have to say. And getting through this journey, with the team of the UNEC team and yourself has been quite, I would say, enriching. I'm sure that this technical guide will be a real tool for bridging the gap between urban forestry ambitions and implementation of urban forestry itself. And thank you for that. I have to say that we have, when we have set up the interviews with the different cities and national governments, it's been, in that very interactions and exchanges that we've had, I was sure that something extremely interesting would come up. For example, when we were having the discussion with Kelly Mane, it was so interesting to learn from the city itself that yes, there is mangrove that can help in securing some of the urban forestry challenges, but on the other side, there is political issues such as differences in the national and local government political views that sometimes can hamper and hinder the development of. So it's been a learning process, and I'm sure that
I think Stefania's connection just cut out, but she was wrapping up and about to move to open questions. So just before I do that, Stefania, I jumped in because you cut out. I have
today my
say-
internet is a little bit, capricious.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it was a fantastic presentation, Russell. And there's only one thing I would see differently. You said it's not rocket science, but the reality is we've sent people to the moon, and we still can't get enough tree cover in our cities. So I think the solutions are simple. And when you present them the way you did, I think it's very clarifying, and hopefully that can help to. I think there's a challenge of ambition, a challenge of maybe even awareness and attention. And I hope that today, maybe in the discussion, we can hear a little bit about how to achieve more support at the higher political levels. But I also think that the framework you provided really shows how simple it can be, and I think that's an important part of getting that support. But I see, Stefania, you have the slides back. I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you so much. I think we can open the floor for questions, comments. Now that we're having this guidance, how can we ensure its practical implementation and application? What strategies can help align urban forestry with national climate goals? How do we engage with the national and municipal leaders to accelerate action? Any kind of comments, questions are welcome from your side. If I don't see hands, Daniel, if you see hands up, can you?
Well, I think we had one a second ago, but I also think the idea here is we may have questions to Russell or feedback to Russell on the presentation. So questions in that regard, or to these prompts on the screen.
I had seen before Cole from Denver who raised the hand. Is that correct? Cole, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I just wanted to thank Russell for that. I am already looking at the champion trees of South Africa and the minister or the National Forest Acts of 1998, seeing how we can't implement it on a more local scale. That was just something I was not aware of. So thank you so much. Very much appreciate that.
Thanks, Cole. Any other specific questions to, if you have any question to Russell, pick his brain now because you won't have the opportunity in the next future. Any kind of questions from your side, please come in.
Stefania, maybe as people are thinking about their questions, I mean, we put a lot of questions on the screen at the same time, so it's also a bit overwhelming. But this year is a year when NDCs are supposed to be submitted for many countries. They maybe should have already been submitted, but in practice, most of them will probably come in this year. So I'm curious from anyone who is involved in preparing an updated NDC, if there's any comments you would have that we may incorporate into the guidance or questions that you still would like to address on how to take this guidance and actually get it implemented in NDCs, right? So we're showing all the different ways to promote urban forests at the national level, at the subnational level. Is there something missing in that you would want to see in terms of how we take this guidance and apply it? Is there a need for technical assistance? Is there a need for peer exchange? What are the needs out there?
I can see we have a hand up. Please introduce yourself first and then with a question or comment. Thanks.
Hi. My name is Ifat Holtzman Gazit. I'm a professor of law from Israel, and I would like to ask Russell, and relating also to the comment recently, what law can help in these initiatives? Most of them are really programs, are not formal legal instrument, and I'm asking myself for quite a long time, what is missing? Why we do not include those initiatives in a rather formal framework of laws, regulation, enforcement? So this is my question.
Okay, thank you very much, Yifat. Would you like to answer that now, Stefania? Okay.
Please, Russell.
Good question. Good question. Well, I think probably the first point is to recognize that there are many different types of urban forestry governance models, and some countries have very centralized systems. So notably China, where they have this national urban, I think it's called National Forest City Policy, and they're aiming to achieve 300 cities this year as national urban forest cities. Another example might be Canada, where it's a very decentralized system and cities are empowered to develop their own elaborate urban forestry plans, like Vancouver. Vancouver has this fantastic local urban forestry plan. But in terms of the law, I mean, there are bylaws, there are national laws, and there can be very strict penalties. So in Singapore, there are all sorts of laws that are implemented to protect urban forests. I mean, planning permissions must be obtained to even cut down a single tree, and every tree, I believe, in Singapore is identified and mapped, so they monitor it carefully. But I do wonder as well, given the fact that this is a policy guidance, I focus more on the broadest sense of policy, which is a course of action essentially with guiding principles. But yes, probably hard law is needed as well to underpin all of these. And I did mention briefly enforcement mechanisms. You can have the best policies and the best laws, but if they're not enforced, then they won't amount to much. Not a very satisfactory answer, but I take your point, and perhaps I can better reflect that in these guidelines.
Thank you.
Answers your question.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
Great. I can see Niane Abdulaziz raised her hand, and then Jennifer, with whom we had the interview for the technical guidance. So please, Niane Abdulaziz, introduce yourself and come in.
Yes, my name is Abdulaziz Nian. I'm the Ikada country manager in the United Arab Emirates and the region of Sula. My question is this guideline one size fits all? Because I'm saying this because, I mean, the forestry issues across different ecosystems are significantly different. Do we one size fits all as a guideline? Over.
Yes, they are targeting specifically cities or let's say countries in dry and arid or even semi-arid regions. But many of the examples are drawn from countries that are quite wet, like the UK. But those examples are only included insofar as they are relevant, if it's a policy which could be emulated elsewhere. But yes, there is, okay, I think that it's always going to be necessary to exercise some common sense, and every recommended intervention should be carefully assessed for its local feasibility, suitability, and acceptability. But ultimately, yes, it is a one size fits all guideline with that important caveat.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I can see Jennifer from Brazil, the Minister of the Environment. Please introduce yourself and come in, and then more hands are up. So Jennifer, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Vieser. I'm from the Brazilian Environment Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. And if I may enter the discussion about laws, in Brazil, we have a bill, is a draft law to establish the National Urban Forest Policy, which will be like an umbrella legislation for our National Urban Forestry Plan. And we also have the law mentioned by Russell, which stipulates that 10% of the resources from all environmental finds in the country must be allocated for urban forest and for restoration of degraded areas. But it's kind of difficult to enforce this. So as Russell said, we have this law since 2018. And we are just now actually trying to enforce it. About the guidelines, Russell, I just wanted to say congratulations on organizing all these experiences and knowledges from different countries. I'm sure it's not a easy work to do that. And I think it will really help us to see what other countries are doing and to inspire us and to see which experiences from them we can use it here in Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's great to see you again.
No, it's been great. Brazil has been one of the key members of the coalition since the very beginning, and it's been interesting not only the interview that we've held with them, but also when we came into the challenge of the desertification convention, we also interviewed a specific expert on that side, and that really helped in developing the guidance on the global challenges. Thanks for that, Jennifer. And I see Birgui from the desertification COP is in the call. We were in Riyadh together at COP 16. Birgui, do you want to come in?
Yes, Stefania, and just really thank you. This is an enlightening presentation. Thank you, Russell, for this putting this guide together and presenting it. It's really helpful, and I was delighted to see the example from around the world, not only one region, but really around the world on how this can be implemented. My slight question would be, how do we kind of come together and work on this? Because I see example coming from the ministries in charge of the urban reforestation, forest, for example, but which role do you foresee, or how do we enhance the role of local governance, the mayors, because this is trees in the cities, and which role and how, for example, I'm forward-looking on the roles and how the NFP, the national focal points for the Rio Convention, can, for example, play a critical role in here, in conjunction also with the national governance and the mayors of the different cities to spread this concept and this initiative. But thank you. It's really refreshing to see this type of presentation with the concrete example from the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Birgit. That's very kind. And to answer your question, in the long form document, yes, there is a recognition of the potential for national governments to support their subnational and local governments, not only in achieving policy coherence, but also in affording them the necessary resources, technical and financial, to deliver sustainable urban and peri-urban forestry. I think it could certainly be strengthened. I should have perhaps emphasized it more in this presentation. But yeah, that's a really important point. And as I said earlier, there are many different models of urban forestry governance that I came across. There are some countries where it's very, very decentralized, and the local governments have almost full power to decide on everything. Whereas in other countries, the national government really sets the overarching direction. So I'll try to nuance that into the text. Thank you, Bergay.
Thank you, Russell. As a next step, I think that we're also going to be sharing the technical guidance with all our stakeholders, and also kind of come up with specific peer exchanges that can help, focus on the implementation of the guidance itself. And that I pass the floor. I give the floor to Hamu from SBA. Is in particular beginning. The floor is yours. Hamu, are you with us?
Yes,
Great.
Stefania, there is some interruption from your side, but I can hear you. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Russell, for the nice presentation and very well illustrated. It shows that the scope for trees in cities goes from very arid to tropical cities. It means that the scope is quite vast, and that might be problematic for technical guidelines, and in the sense that the situation, as Nian has mentioned, might be very different from Manama to city in Brazil or Colombia. The issue is that the local governance in cities puts the municipalities in the challenge of having the task of developing and managing and conserving urban forests without getting the assets that it takes, both human resources and financial resources. So local governance works, but the problem with the local governance and decentralization, when it's not accompanied with the necessary assets in terms of finance and in terms of regulation, then it doesn't work. And maybe this is why municipalities are challenged to think of small interventions rather than structuring programs that consider trees in cities as strategic element in urban sustainable development. The second question is maybe at least in some of the countries in this region, small cities should be prioritized because they offer more space, more resources in terms of natural resources, where we can work on cities, trees for cities with more latitude, more assets, and probably prioritizing which cities are we putting first on the agenda is also an important element to include into guidelines. That the size of the city is a critical element in decision making. Prioritizing. So I would stop here. Thank you. Thank you again, Stefania and Daniel, for organizing this interesting discussion.
No, thank you, Hamu. Thank you very much. I think that when we started the coalition 2 years ago, we wouldn't have, as much as we put so much dedication into this initiative. I'm not sure if we would have so much coming so soon after all, because each of us is so busy, but at the same time, pulling together the right stakeholders really was able of driving this process, and the fact that you're developing the stream on finance with the multilateral banks, and then specifically the stream on policy gives a real robust consistency to the coalition itself. If any other, happy to get any other comments or questions from the audience.
And Stefan, I don't know if Russell, I don't know if you want to come into the points raised by Hamu.
Well, just on the matter of scale and the size of cities, of course, they vary considerably. From mega cities. I think the city of Tokyo has a population greater than the population of Canada. So they really do vary considerably. And I know that when I spoke to ICLEI, which is somewhat involved, I believe, and Jennifer, you may need to correct me here, but they're somewhat involved in the development of the new national urban afforestation policy. They explained that they were trying to cluster the activities as efficiently as possible, or cluster the measures, let's say, within the policy. And one of the ways they've looked at doing that is by categorizing the different sizes of cities and tailoring the policy accordingly. But perhaps Jennifer would be best placed to clarify that.
We are actually still working on that. We are constructing the national plan, but we'll try to have guidelines and information for different size cities. So big cities with more than 500,000 people, with medium-sized cities with from 100,000 to 500,000 people in the population. And for small cities, we're still discussing that if we're going to divide the small cities or group them together, but are the cities with less than 100,000 people in the population. But also we are trying to discuss about some other groups, like for cities in the coastal area, if you have something different for them, or cities that are arid, or dry cities, or cities that have more problems with heat or with rain. We are still discussing all that, but we are definitely going to have these different groups because Brazil is such a big country. We have 5,500 cities, different municipalities here in Brazil. So we are going to group them differently so we can work them on the national level.
Thanks.
No, thanks, Jennifer. When we heard about how Brazil is involving the municipal actors themselves in order to be commenting and integrating in the national urban forestry plan, I mean, we couldn't but take it into consideration as a leading example for other countries as well. It's really something that we should keep in mind as a best practice, I would say. Any other comments or questions from the audience?
I might just come in then, Stefania, with a quick follow-up as well on my side. I mean, Hamu, you highlighted how it's challenging for municipalities. And I think there's a pro and a con, right? Because the municipalities have an integrated function. So urban forests have benefits across many sectors, across health, across energy, across education, happiness, etc. Property values, for example. And so at the municipal level is where the investment generates a very positive cost benefit for the city that can potentially even be recovered, although not directly, which is why it's challenging to finance. But it's harder to link that to an NDC or to an NBSAP or a national action plan, because that needs to then be linked up into a national strategy. And if you have a decentralized approach, the municipalities are more empowered, but they're less linked to these national plans. So I think we need to have different approaches depending on the context, as Russell has highlighted in many cases. So this is a little bit what we can look at in our funding concepts approach as well. That can work at the local, national, or the national level, depending on your context. And it would be great to see examples of how for plans in the Rio Convention in general, local is being integrated into national plans. I know this is also very context specific. Different countries have different architectures, coordination mechanisms, processes to put together their NDCs. They bring in input from so many different stakeholders, and the way that municipal or local level is reflected will vary quite significantly. So just a comment there that there's different challenges depending on the context and different opportunities.
Thanks, Daniel. Indeed, what I always say that what UNEC is trying to be doing is really to be listening to the counterparts that we, come up with when we exchange opinions, challenges, opportunities, and the Trees in Dry Cities Coalition came in exactly to be answering those very questions, like how dry regions can face the, most urgent problems of climate disaster, which is more and more frequent specifically in given dry cities, and together with the key partners from around the world, the WGO, the Convention on Desertification, the regional UN commissions, national governments like Brazil and Jordan, cities like Cuenca, Quelimane, Istanbul. We're really forging an action agenda which is proving to be effective, I have to say. With that, I think that, Daniel, we can slowly wrap up and think about the next steps. I can see one hand up. Darlene Harris, please come in and introduce yourself first.
So it's Darlene Harris and John Harris. We're with Earth Advisors in the U.S. We're actually located in South Florida. Darlene is a biologist. I'm an urban forester and landscape economist. So a couple of policy level points that I wanted to add and just have people check on. So one of the important points in regulations or policies from a national to a regional to a local level is concurrency. So what we have in a lot of projects, programs that we're involved with is that there are federal regulations and then state level regulations. And then in the US, we have counties. And then within the counties are the municipalities. So the broader level at the national coming down to local levels. And one of the things that I think is important, not only in maintaining or expanding the urban forest, is the use of and reference of industry standards. There are international industry standards for arboriculture or maintenance of urban trees, as well as all the research done all across the world about species and planting techniques and establishment care. So I just add that to the discussion. And then the other point is, as an economist, we do a lot of appraisal work for tree and landscape appraisals, some of which are for municipality-wide or county-wide policy and planning. So recognizing that urban trees are actually capital assets. So like other assets, land assets, building assets, that are owned by, maintained by, recognizing in policies that capital assets are urban trees and that they can be appraised, and that by increasing and improving their maintenance and as they grow, they actually increase in value, which is some research and articles that I've written. And I think that this is a source of kind of a next step for these policies across the world, as well as having this established in the accounting and in the finance markets with the World Bank and other investment groups, so that there's an opportunity to show that investments actually can be grown, and showing how that investment actually expands and is the seed money. As we talk about urban forests, the seed money for growing the urban forest, including growing the economic value. So those are points that we wanted to add.
No, thank you so much. All points taken. We have taken notes. We noted them down. Absolutely, trees are a functional capital asset. And that's the reason why we have been coming up with this, strong initiatives like Trees in City Challenge and the Trees in Dry Cities Coalition, in order to be really giving the right importance to this critical infrastructure. So as next steps, whomever is interested to follow up and be involved into this policy pillar discussion with us, you can fill out the form that will be now in the chat, so that we can work together on how can the coalition support the application of this guidance and how the coalition can promote the global climate certification and biodiversity goals this year. It's you can fill out the form and come back to us so that we can, we can keep you in the loop for the development of the practical steps of the guidance itself. I don't know whether Daniel and Russell, you want to come in for final remarks?
Actually, I have nothing much more to add except to say thank you very much for all the feedback and also the kind and encouraging remarks. I've taken notes and will obviously implement them in cooperation with yourself, Stefania and Daniel. So thank you very much, and also to the interviewees who very kindly offered their time, such as Jennifer and others. That was really insightful and has helped a lot. So thank you.
And yeah, from my side, I mean, first I want to thank Russell. I mean, it was a great presentation. I think the way you've structured it and brought in all those examples that we've heard from others is really useful. Thanks. I also want to echo the thanks to Jennifer and others who contributed their time in the interviews. In terms of next steps, what I would add here is one thing that came out quite clearly from Russell's presentation is the importance of having clear targets. If you don't have clear targets, everything else is not aligned towards a common goal. And so I want to highlight that we are also have another work stream in parallel on urban forest metrics, which we think can help set targets at the local level and at the national level. These can be linked to financing. If you want results-based finance, these can be linked to plans and programs with national governments. So we'll be sharing more information on that as well. And if you are interested in working with us on how we can help mainstream into NDCs and other Rio plans, do reach out after the call. We'd be happy to discuss further with you. And of course, we'll be in touch as we have our upcoming peer exchange. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you very much, Russell. Thank you very much to all the stakeholders which have been involved from the very beginning with such dedication. I have to say that we really laid the foundation for the success of this coalition, which is partnerships, participation, and knowledge that we have been working and developing and strengthening together. So very welcome to the next steps to get your input, your insights for the follow-up. Keep tuned with us and see you when we are going to be releasing the technical guidance and the next steps for the finance stream as well. Thank you very much. Goodbye.